Welcome again, everybody. And I think we're now going to go ahead and formally get started. My name is Alfred Ayub. I am the Senior Director of Admissions here at Columbia Climate School. On the back end, helping us with the Q&A is Damaris Diaz, our Assistant Director of Enrollment, as well as Gabby Medina, a current student in the MA Climate and Society program and a current admissions intern working with us. So they're going to be helping us with the Q&As during the session today. Before I do formally introduce our guest speakers, I'd love to just briefly run through the agenda. We are going to perform a broad overview on Columbia Climate School. We're also going to talk about the student profile. So who currently studies at Columbia Climate School? And then we're going to deep dive into the distinct degree programs with which we offer. We'll talk about the MA Climate and Society program, which is our origin degree. That degree, in fact, existed before the Columbia Climate School was founded. And that's the degree with which Alora and Van graduated from. And then we are also going to discuss the newly launched MS in Climate degree. This is a degree program we formally announced in late September. And are now currently recruiting our first class. But I think through Alora and Van's experiences, the MS in climate does share quite a bit of climate core. And so I think you're going to get a lot of understanding in both degree programs through today's session. We're also going to then touch on professional development opportunities, financial aid, and then my favorite process, of course, the application process, because I'm in admissions, so I have to give that a shout out and a deep dive discussion. But without further ado, I'd love to now go ahead and introduce our two recent alumni, Vanshika Goel and Alora Cisneroz are joining us today. Both graduated this year from the MA Climate and Society program. So again, they are alumni, but their academic experiences are pretty recent and fresh when reflecting on their classroom experiences. I'd like to go ahead and allow them each to kind of share their climate story, why Columbia Climate School, and what they're currently doing. And if we could begin with Van.
Sure, I'm just testing that my mic is working. Yeah,
beautiful.
Okay, wonderful. Hi everyone. As Alfred mentioned, I'm Van, like the vehicle, and I graduated with the MA Climate and Society this year. Before that, I came straight out of undergrad, so I was in the UK at the University of Oxford, and I was doing my BA in the human sciences. And that's kind of lots of anthropology, biology, human development, and to me, doing climate and society seemed like a natural extension from that. My interest has always been in kind of human development, nonprofit work, and obviously a big part of that is climate resilience, climate adaptation, climate justice. So I thought the climate school was a great way to pick up that experience. I currently work at the Rockefeller Foundation here in New York, and I'm on their health team, where I'm kind of working on a series of climate and health grants that look at adaptation in kind of vulnerable geographies across the world.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you, Van. And now, yes, Alora.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Alora. Same with Van, we are in the same cohort together, so graduated from this program this year. Before coming here, I was at Cornell University studying environmental science and law. So I have always known for a long time that I wanted to come into the climate space. I knew that I was interested in policy and law. And so I had a very specific vision when I came into grad school, and I think that if you come here, you'll meet a lot of people who have a similar story, that they know what they want to get out of the program. And so I was one of those people. And as far as like why climate, I think that for me in particular, there was a sense of if I have the privilege to choose what I study and what I do with my life and my career, I felt a calling to do something that was important. And for me, climate felt like the most important issue that our generation and future generations face. So it felt like a sort of an obligation to me, but one that I happily take. And currently, I am working for the federal government, the Environmental Protection Agency, and I work on regulation for the oil and gas industry. So I definitely have stayed within this policy space, in this climate space. So I'm happy to speak to that experience or anything related to this program as well. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, Alora and Van. So don't worry, Alora and Van are coming back into the presentation and speaking to a little bit more nuance relating to their academic experiences in the program, the summer component of the MA program, which also speaks to the MS program. So stay tuned. Alora and Van are definitely coming back. To give you a little bit more nuance as it relates to Columbia Climate School itself, and just to give you some introduction, I always like to anchor everybody with an understanding of the university. So when you say Columbia University, you are referring to a major research institution, in fact, considered a blueprint of research institutions. In terms of our history, we are the oldest school in the state of New York, the fifth oldest here in the United States. And when you refer to Columbia University, you're referring to an institution with over 20 different schools that fall underneath that umbrella. The majority of those schools being graduate professional schools. So think of Columbia Business School, Columbia School of Journalism that administers the Pulitzer Prize each year, Columbia School of Social Work, Columbia's Medical School, the School of International and Public Affairs. The list goes on. And the Columbia Climate School is the newest school within Columbia University. It was formally announced in 2020 and launched in 2021, and it's a truly interdisciplinary institution. And our ethos is that the world requires knowledgeable leaders to work with business, communities, governments, and civil society to address the climate crisis. Columbia Climate School's graduate degree programs and other learning opportunities provide an interdisciplinary knowledge base for climate leaders with diverse interests and backgrounds. And nothing is more distilled in that than really and truly looking at our students and understanding who our students are, because they're incredibly diverse in terms of their academic backgrounds, in terms of their professional journeys, in terms of how they wish to address the climate crisis post their graduate school degree, which we'll touch on shortly. But also even through our faculty members, when you're seeing Columbia Climate School faculty and professors of climate, some of our professors of climate, like Sheila Foster, are coming with deep backgrounds in law. Other professors, like Professor Ming-Fang Ting, are coming as scientists, atmospheric and the ocean. You know, they have deep, deep knowledge in those realms. So we have some really diverse professors that are joining us, and our professors has to be interdisciplinary when it comes to addressing the climate crisis. In terms of the students that study at Columbia Climate School, and again, this is a representation of our fall 2024 incoming class, which is the MA Climate and Society. We've welcomed just over 120 new students into our learning community. Approximately 44% of the new students are international students. We had 27 countries of citizenship represented and 18 states represented among our domestic students. Something else that we're very proud of is approximately 15% of our students are the first in their family to attend college. We classify those students as first-generation college students here at Columbia. And then finally, the average age in this year's cohort is 26 years old. Something I always like to note that while we do have a number of students that are coming right from undergrad to our graduate program, that's a typical journey, we also have a sizable number, although I want to acknowledge a minority, but about 20% of the students that enter our graduate programs this year had 5 or more years of professional work experience. So we have a number of students that join us also where maybe they're seeking a second graduate degree. They already have an MBA or an MPA degree, but they really want that climate lens. We also have a number of students that are seeking career pivots, and so therefore they're coming later to Columbia Climate School. So I also want to acknowledge that audience. In terms of the academic backgrounds of our students, this is where that interdisciplinary interplay comes in. So, you know, again, we have a number of students that join the program. Interestingly, Alora and Van just so happen to have more of those STEM classic backgrounds, but that's not necessarily always the case. We have actually a majority of students joining the program that have more social science backgrounds. So, for example, they studied political science or economics. We have a number of students. We also lump in that background as business undergraduate degrees, so having a finance degree, for example. And then we have students that are interested in anthropology or urban planning. And then about 1/3 of our students do come into the program with more of a classic STEM background, so a biology or an environmental science. Actually, I shouldn't say that. Alora was a combination, right? You said environmental science and law. So yeah, so yeah. Alora was like a great synthesis of the learning community. But But again, it's a very diverse student audience with really different undergraduate majors represented and very diverse ultimate goals. And so what I always like to say is, you might be sitting in this classroom and you're thinking, I'm deeply interested in carbon capture technology. That's where like the driving heartbeat of me joining the climate school lies. And then somebody sitting next to that person is really interested in climate policy. And, your ultimate goal is to work at the United Nations, or maybe you want to be more localized and you want to work for your state government, for example, in that space. And then another person sitting next to them is deeply committed to the private sector, and their interest is working in a sustainability consulting role. So it's a very, very diverse student audience, and you'll see that as you join multiple sessions. We just Alora and Van Grayson did the session before this one. So he had a kind of an energy background, and really with that more private sector lens. So again, you'll hear these different voices and the diverse perspectives that run through them. Just to briefly touch on the degree programs at a very high level, again, today we're going to talk about both the MS in Climate and the MA Climate and Society program. I want to touch on what they have in common. Well, they both are STEM designated programs. So any international students joining us today, if you're deeply interested in ensuring the programs are STEM designated, both the MS in Climate as well as the MA in Climate and Society are STEM designated programs. But now let's talk a little bit about their distinctions. So the MS in Climate is a 50 credit hour program. It can be completed in 21 months. It's 4 semesters of academic coursework, while the MA in Climate and Society program is a 1-year program, can be completed in 12 months, and it's 3 semesters of coursework. In terms of enrollment plans, the MS in Climate is exclusively for full-time students, and so that is only a full-time program, whereas the MA in Climate and Society is for full-time or part-time students. Although I do want to be transparent, we have a vast majority of students enrolled in the MA Climate and Society at the full-time rate, although we do allow part-time enrollment. In fact, to give you an example, Alora and Van's student cohort was around 104 students, and just 4 of them were part-time. This year's cohort is 121 students, and just 8 of those students are part-time. So again, the vast majority of students that join the MA program are full-time students. And then in terms of practical experience, the MS program will have a built-in internship that occurs between your first and second year, along with a capstone that occurs in your final semester. Whereas the MA Climate and Society program, which underwent an interesting evolution, will next year exclusively have a capstone. Now, I do want to anchor everybody. Alora and Van are likely going to be discussing an internship experience, which is great. So I think what we want to acknowledge is that Columbia Climate School has a very long-standing history of working with students that are pursuing internships as that applied learning experience. But for this coming year, the MA Climate and Society will be a capstone only option. So now let's dive into the MA Climate and Society first. This is a STEM designated, as Amy mentioned, 34 credit program, interdisciplinary, that trains professionals and academics to understand and address the impacts of climate variability and change on society and the environment. And through classes and research, students gain knowledge in the physical and social sciences and the humanities as they relate to climate. What I always like to emphasize is this program is going to teach you how to communicate also the climate crisis with various constituents, and you'll be able to communicate it, for example, from a scientific level, why climate change is occurring, but you'll also be able to communicate what's going on behind the climate data. And you'll be able to make decisions based off of that. Again, distill it for decision makers if you yourself are not necessarily the decision maker, but communication is key in the MA Climate and Society program. Just to give you an aerial view of the MA Climate and Society program, the first semester is largely going to be made up of climate core courses, along with an applied climate section, which is largely case-based work. You'll then continue in the spring semester with additional climate core courses, along with electives, which is a very dynamic journey. We're going to hear Alora and Van speak about how they approach the electives. And then finally, your final summer semester will continue with electives, and then you will also complete a capstone, a summer capstone workshop, which is a very, again, applied learning experience where you're working on a team, specifically working with an organization to address an issue with which they come forward with. So now let's touch on the climate core, because I think what is unique about the learning community is just how diverse the students are in terms of what their ultimate goals are. You can actually see, even from Alora and Van, they're doing very different types of work in the Rockefeller Foundation and the EPA. But what's the through line for all of our students specifically is this climate core, the idea that regardless of industry or sector, if you are going to be entering this the workforce as a climate professional, you need to have this foundation understanding. And the climate core this coming year is undergoing really an exciting evolution. One of the courses, Climate Justice, Theory, Practice, and Policy. This course is taught by Professor Sheila Foster. Alora and Van, during their cohort, this would have been offered as an elective course, but interestingly, it was through student feedback specifically from their cohort that they said this course is too important not to be a part of the course. So therefore, next year, this will be a core course for all incoming MA Climate and Society students. We also have the history of the climate crisis. And then we have two courses that are considered the pillars in addressing climate change, which is climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. And the final two courses within the climate core is what I would classify as what really makes this a STEM designated program. It's dynamics of climate variability and change and quantitative models for climate application. Dynamics being largely a physics class, again, kind of explaining the why climate change exists. And then finally, quantitative models is a data course. I always like to reference this being the climate jobs course. You know, data is king, regardless of industry or sector. It's extremely important to be able to understand and tell a story with data. That's how you make decisions, is with data. So the quantitative models course is going to expose you to climate data and specifically using R. Let me pause there because I would love, and maybe we'll start with Alora. Could you share kind of your experiences in the climate core, any kind of tidbits that you would want a prospective student to be aware of as a student enrolled in the climate core?
Yeah, I think that for myself, I knew which classes I would immediately click with the most. And for me, mitigation, I knew would be that course. And I was right about that. But I think I was surprised by how much I really enjoyed adaptation. Professor Lisa Dale is the one who taught it when I was there. And I think it's very well organized, and it's like an element of climate solutions that I think is unfortunately underemphasized in a lot of literature and a lot of sort of coursework in general. And so to have a course that's entirely focused on adaptation was really interesting, even though for me it's not something that I pursued afterwards. Being able to understand it and understand the challenges with adaptation, how it's financed, how it operates at an international scale. These are all things that are so important to know. And I really got a lot out of this class. And the final term paper I thought was really interesting and rewarding. I even used it for an application, I think, for some internship. So there are definitely even beyond the course, like you can get more out of it as you leave. So that was one of the core courses that stood out with me the most. I'm excited to hear that Sheila Foster is teaching the climate justice class. I took her climate law and policy elective, and she is a fantastic professor. So the next cohort will have an amazing time with her. She's so great to learn from.
Excellent. Thank you, Alora. And Van, any kind of insights on the climate core and your experiences in it?
There we go. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. But yeah, I think compared to Laura, I kind of come from the flip side where I think I had a feeling that I would enjoy the adaptation side of things and hadn't really gotten any exposure to mitigation, to actual technical climate science, because of my background kind of in the human sciences. And I think the value of the core courses is the fact that any field of work that you go into, whether it's private sector, public sector, third sector, mitigation side, adaptation side, you really need a grounding in all of it, you know? And even though I work kind of On the adaptation side, I'm always referencing things that I learned in mitigation classes, relying on skills that I picked up in quantitative models. And so I think, yeah, regardless of what area you go into, like Alfred said, this is such an interdisciplinary movement that you're always going to be taking from all of those classes at once. And like Alora said, I think lots of classes will surprise you with how much you engage with them and how much you enjoy them. And I think that's the beauty of doing something that's as broad-based as the MA in Climate and Society.
Excellent. Thank you, Van. I appreciate it. So stay tuned, guys. Van and Alora are now going to be sharing their elective journeys with you shortly, which I think is always the most dynamic and interesting aspect of the program. So now let's go ahead and we'll just briefly transition. For the MA, I want to touch on the idea of part-time enrollment. Is anybody interested in part-time joining the session? Feel free to type in the Q&A, interested in part-time. I'm interested in seeing how many students might be interested in that. The MA program, as we mentioned, does allow a part-time option. You would have to indicate it in your admissions application. So you would make that case. Students enrolling in the part-time program generally include kind of one or more of the following profiles. So people with demonstrated significant work experience in a climate or climate adjacent space, as well as working professionals currently in any space that can reasonably assert they can readily apply the MA in Climate and Society program to their current work, or to easily transition to a climate or a related field where they can apply to the program. So for example, we've had students join the program part-time working in the private sector and kind of a climate technology role. We've had students join the program in also sustainability consultants looking for that additional nuance of climate. We've had students join the program working at the governor's office. So usually it's students that are working professionals, and you would indicate that in the admissions application. I just saw, forgive me, Hudson asked, by part-time, does it refer to the number of hours taken at a time or not enrolling in consecutive semesters? Part-time would refer to the number of courses that you take in a semester. So that's what we are referring to, that you would start the program, let's say, with 3 courses rather than a traditional full-time schedule, 2 or 3 courses. I will say part-time students do follow a very specific curriculum. It would be a 2-year plan versus a 1-year plan for the MA Climate and Society program. And the other thing I have to be transparent about as it relates to part-time is that this is not a Columbia night school program. So we don't offer exclusive evening courses or online courses to complete your degree. Some of your courses might be offered in the evening, certainly electives, but by and large, it's going to be daytime courses. So you'd have to anticipate that and have an authentic conversation with your employer if you were pursuing that path. So now let me touch on the MS in Climate program. And this is the newest degree program within Columbia Climate School, also STEM designated. It's a 50 credit hour professional degree that gives graduates from diverse backgrounds an in-depth training in specific areas of climate expertise and prepares them to be climate leaders at community, state, national, and international levels. What I want to emphasize about the MS in Climate program is that it is a longer timeline, and therefore it affords you an opportunity to dive deeper in specific climate topics. So a huge distinguishing characteristic between the MA and the MS is what we call the advanced certificates. It's a second credential embedded within the MS in Climate program. So it's a 50 credit hour program. 18 of those credits are going to be made up of your advanced certificate, which we will be talking about shortly. But to give you an aerial view of the MS in Climate, I mentioned it is a 21-month program. It is a 4-semester degree. Now you'll say, well, Alfred, you have here listed 5 semesters, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer. The summer semester between your first and second year, we do have a required internship requirement, but you will not be paying tuition for that specific summer semester. So I want to be transparent about that. In terms of the fall semester, you do begin with the climate core. It's a continuation of the climate core in the spring semester, along with taking an elective and then beginning your required certificate component. So you begin the advanced certificate component in your spring semester. Again, the summer semester, you're going to be completing an internship. It's a non-credit internship also. I want to emphasize that. There's no credits associated with it, but it is a requirement. And then in the fall semester, the second fall, you'll be completing the climate core, so wrapping that up. along with completing additional electives, the certificate requirement, and the spring would be your final spring would be the continuation of the elective journey, the continuation of the certificate, and then finally wrapping up your degree with the capstone workshop. Okay, so that's the nature of the MS in Climate program, is that longer timeline allows you to dive deeper into a specific topic within climate. It's also allowing you time between your first and second year to pursue that internship. And the MS in Climate also, this was also a result of feedback over the years from some students. Some students start the MA program and they say, you know, I wish I had longer. I wish I had more time to network and take additional electives or dive deeper in that specific topic. So if you are interested in that longer timeline, if you are interested in diving into one of these specific advanced certificates, the MS in Climate obviously would be the better fit. And I want to say this too, is that you're only able to select one program at the time of applying to Columbia Climate School. So you will, when you're applying, need to decide which program you wish to pursue. You unfortunately can't apply to both programs. The climate core here is, this is funny too. So sorry, I don't know, Alora and Van, if you're noticing, you're like, these photos look awfully familiar because you guys were in this photo shoot as well. So this is like the highlight of the MA students in last year's cohort is definitely the face of Columbia Climate School. I have to emphasize that. You can see Varun like very much popularly featured, but Columbia Climate's core, you know, the MS program is remarkably similar, or not so remarkably. It's the same climate core courses, except instead you will not be completing the climate history course. We are replacing that with a second quantitative methods course. The second quantitative methods course is for those students that are pursuing those advanced certificates. So for example, as we move now into this, we have 3 distinct advanced certificates to choose from in the MS in Climate program. Again, 18 of your 50 credit journey will be made up of an advanced certificate. And that quantitative methods course in your climate core will be dictated based on the certificate that you choose. So for example, if you choose climate systems and analytics, you'll be completing a Python course as a part of your climate core. But if you choose climate and disaster management or climate and food systems, your quantitative core course, the second course that is, will be based on a selective. So you'll have, for example, you might be able to choose the Python course or alternatively a GIS class or a machine learning class. Let me now speak a little bit about these advanced certificates. The first one being Climate Systems and Analytics. So Climate Systems and Analytics provides the critical skills and understanding to interpret and analyze climate and weather data, understand climate model predictions and projections, assess climate-related risks to human and natural systems, and develop strategies for mitigating these effects. Professor Radley Horton is the faculty lead for Climate Systems Analytics. Then we have Climate and Disaster Management. This provides students with the foundational knowledge and skills needed to conduct and apply research in various intersecting disciplines relevant to managing disasters. Students will gain new insights into disaster management, particularly in relation to preparedness, response, recovery, and long-term resilience. And then finally, climate and food systems, which I would argue is the most interesting. Professor Jessica Fanzo is the faculty lead for climate and food systems. And what always impresses upon me whenever she does talks on food systems, she always looks at the audience and says, we are all food experts. We all consume food. So this specific advanced certificate focuses on the intersection of climate with food systems, food production, and human livelihood. Students learn how to apply evidence-based approaches to food system transformation, gaining critical skills and knowledge for professional pathways in this emerging field. Again, what I want to emphasize is when you're applying to the MS in Climate program, we will be asking you which advanced certificate you're most interested in. But interestingly, you do not officially declare the advanced certificate until you've enrolled in the MS in Climate, and it's at the end of your first fall semester. That's when you officially state which of the 3 advanced certificates you will decide to choose. And this is just an exercise in me throwing out there, and I love participation. Does anybody want to guess which is thus far among our applicants the most popular advanced certificate? Any guesses? Feel free to type. Let's see. Disaster management, climate food systems. Hudson said food. Food. This is good. I like this. Everybody's going with food. You know, Professor Jessica Fanzo would be thrilled if she saw this. Interestingly, the most popular, ding, 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 Amara got it. It's analytics, climate systems and analytics at the moment. So we'll see what happens. It's still early in the application process. And again, what I want to reference is that you are not locking yourself into that certificate. You're just indicating what you're most interested in as an applicant. You actually don't declare the certificate until the end of your first semester. And actually, before I move on, while I'm on the advanced certificates, we just announced this last week, and we're actually really thrilled about it. We are now launching a new dual degree. And actually, if Damaris or Gabby, if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat the state or pasting in the chat the State of the Planet article highlighting this new dual degree opportunity. So the MS in Climate is launching a new degree with the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation with their MS in Architecture and Urban Design. So that program is a 3-semester, 1-year program. Our MS in Climate, as you're aware, is a 21-month, 4-semester program. If you join that dual degree, interestingly, you, in a 2-year timeline, get those 2 distinct degrees. So the same amount of time to get the MS in Climate, you would get both the MS in Climate and the MS in Architecture and Urban Design. And I think this is really dedicated towards students deeply passionate about the built environment. But in addition, in those 2 years, the MS in Climate will remove 2 semesters of coursework, interestingly, to get that done in those 2 years. So if you're interested in that dual degree, we just copy and pasted a State of the Planet article featuring it. In the admissions application for the MS in Climate, we do have a question that asks, are you interested in a dual degree? If you say yes, we then want to hear that you're interested in the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Something else that climate school leadership would like me to emphasize is this is just the beginning of our advanced certificates. There could be additional options and additional dual degrees offered in future years. So just highlighting that as well. So now let me touch on summer internships. And, you know, I'm going to take a pause, and I'd love to hear Van and Alora speak to their experiences. But one thing I want to emphasize is the MS in Climate now is the only degree program that will offer a summer internship component. And again, these are non-credit internships, and they can be in the nonprofit, private, or public or research sector. And, you know, we've worked with a variety of organizations over the years. The MA Climate and Society program used to have an embedded internship component. That's why our career management office has some understanding in it. But let me take a pause. And Alora and Van, can you speak to kind of how you approach the summer experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our program, during the summer, which seems to be no longer the case, we had the alternative of a capstone or internship. Regardless, if you're looking for an internship in this MS program, I would say, depending on what industry or sector you want to work in, it kind of determines when you have to start looking on your own. So I knew that I wanted to work in the public sector. So I was looking at federal government internships, state government, local government. So I started looking in the fall semester for a summer internship, and applied for a bunch of them in November and December, then started interviewing for those internships, not until actually April. So you have to take into consideration if you're interested in the public sector. Generally, they tend to move pretty slowly. So just account for that when you're applying. Interviewed in the spring semester and then started mine in June. So that was about the timeline of mine. And it was, I used the career office to see if there's any contacts, but for the most part, it was self-driven, looking at and keeping up with any sort of newsletter updates that I could for these particular agencies or departments, and then being on top of it and making sure that I was casting a wide net and not being too picky just for an internship. And that was my strategy.
Excellent. Thanks, Alora. And Van, how did you approach the summer? What was your summer experience like?
Yeah, of course. I noticed that someone's put a question about what kind of support will the school provide to students in finding internships. So I can kind of briefly answer that. Like Alora said, there's a designated careers service. You know, there are resources that they share. And, you know, you can schedule mock interviews, you can ask to speak to a counsellor to kind of talk through concerns that you might have. And there are, yeah, obviously lots of resources available that they can direct you towards. There's also a career platform called Simplicity that you guys will receive accounts to. And over there are job postings, internship postings, you can upload your resume. So it's all quite centralized and easy to access in that way. Coming now to my experience of a summer internship, I kind of knew that I wanted to work in either the private sector or nonprofits and philanthropy, which is what I'm currently doing. And similar to what Alora was saying, I think there are often specific hiring cycles for a lot of these organizations. And so if there are specific organizations that you have in mind, being aware of what their timelines look like. So for example, lots of consulting roles have graduate kind of internship hiring cycles in December and January, and that's when you would apply. Whereas Rockefeller Foundation, which is where I work, opens theirs in January, but applications are open until April. And so I kind of applied towards March and April. And interviewed over April and May, and began my work in June as well. And I think, yeah, I think it, you know, the internships, New York's a great city. There are so many options available to you in terms of what you can do. And so I think a good strategy is to, yeah, have specific organizations, but also really just be open to various experiences. You know, you come into the climate school thinking, okay, I want to go into ESG and corporate sustainability, and then you realize that you love food systems, and so then you decide that you want to work at the World Food Programme instead, you know. So just being really open to experience, I think, is very valuable. But yeah, I always think an Excel sheet is the way to go when applying to jobs and internships.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. And then the alternative option for the MA program historically, although now it's going to become the primary and will be a requirement also in the MS in climate, is this capstone workshop. So this occurs during your final semester. Students complete a 3-credit, forgive me, it's a spring capstone workshop that occurs, or summer for the MA students. And again, it's largely driven by small group projects, and you're working with an outside client organization. And this is just to give you a few examples that are fairly diverse from one another. One that speaks to me, and forgive me if you've attended multiple of these sessions, but I mentioned earlier, I'm from Florida, I'm from the Tampa Bay area. So last year they partnered with, or 2 years ago, forgive me, WFLA TV, which is the NBC affiliate down in Florida and Tampa, and Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. And it was to assess the Tampa Bay area's vulnerability compared to other cities along the West Florida coast and glean explanations for the city's vulnerability under current climate conditions. You know, what's so incredible since this specific capstone is this was one of the most challenging and continues to be one of the most challenging hurricane seasons for the West Coast of Florida. So we really do need people to do continued work in this space. We've also worked with the United Nations Foundation Climate and Environment Program, where climate proofing food systems in the Global South was worked on, assessing investments in research and innovation for resilient smallholder agriculture. And we've also worked with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We do have some of those capstones recorded from this most recent summer 2024's work. So specifically Alora and Van's cohort, the students that did pursue capstones. If anybody is interested in seeing those clients or recordings, I'm happy to get those for you. Feel free to just type it in the Q&A or send us an email. All right, now I want to touch on climate school electives. And I think this is actually the most exciting aspect. One thing I always like to note is when I joined Columbia Climate School, which is in March of 2022, there were only 3 electives offered that academic year for our graduate students. This year, we had over 20 different electives being offered, and they were very diverse, ranging from politics of climate in Asia to climate change and disaster management, Black ecologies. We have climate mobility, strategic communication for climate change. So it really ran the gamut within Columbia Climate School. And then, of course, one other element I want to touch on, and then I want to hear kind of Van and Alora's approach, but we're also our academic program and our academic leadership is actually, I think, does a phenomenal job of thinking through the electives and how they complement one another. So interestingly, for Van and Alora's class. In the summer, we offered the first time this course called Financing Renewable Energy. Van and Alora, I'm not sure if you guys took the course. It was with Nadia Zentz. This course examines key ingredients necessary to finance a renewable project to make it economic, including exploring different forms of capital available, again, to successfully finance a project, along with analyzing the revenue models for renewables investors that require return to justify the investment. So think of the financing renewable energy as the private sector lens to climate finance. And then that was taught by Nadia Zentz in the summer. We're teaching it again this fall. And then the second course that we're offering this fall that I think is a beautiful complement to students that have this climate finance interest is Climate Policy and Investment by Lisa Sachs. And this is, think of it as the public sector consideration when you're thinking about climate finance. So it explores the many interrelated challenges to investing in energy transition to see why the big picture is important for really understanding policies or practices at a granular level. You know, we can't solely rely on the private sector to invest in clean energy. We also need the policy to back it up. And so this course analyzes the policy behind it. And I think it's just a really nice example of complementing elective courses. And then we have the cross-registration journey of it all at Columbia University. So, you know, there's a reason why you're looking at Columbia. There's a reason why you should be looking at Columbia. It's the idea that we are a major blueprint research institution, and you have access to some incredible professional schools, whether it's the School of International and Public Affairs, Columbia Law School, Columbia's Mailman School of Public Health, the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation, what I referenced earlier, Columbia Engineering. So again, you have access to these incredible schools. For your electives, as long as they're a graduate level course, you're able to cross-register, and they allow cross-registration. So let me take a pause, because I think what I always do is when I talk about electives, I give so many different options, but I think what's most compelling is actually hearing recent alumni talk about how they've approached the electives, the decisions that they made, what the pain points were. So maybe if we can begin with Van, could you talk about how you approached your elective journey in the climate school?
Yes, of course. I'm sorry, before I do, I'm just gonna run backwards slightly because someone put a question in that I didn't fully answer about so will the international students or those non-citizen students have the same job and internship opportunities as the students that have citizenship? Yeah, I think my answer to that is, on the whole, especially for internships, yes, because they're short-term engagements. I think there are long-term jobs that will have visa requirements and will ask for permanent citizens and residents, but they'll list this on their application. With internships, it's a lot more flexible because they know it's a temporary engagement, and while you're enrolled at Columbia, you will have a curricular practical training visa, which allows you to do these sorts of jobs. But I would definitely say you kind of have to read the fine print when you're applying to jobs, and know that if it's a large organization, they'll probably be fine because they're able to sponsor visas. But yeah, it's always listed in the job posting is my general advice. But coming now, yes, to electives. I kind of, given that the core courses were as broad-based as they were, I saw electives as my chance to branch out into other schools, but also to specialize in specific areas. I knew that I was interested in health and human rights and food. And so I took bullet number 2 here, which is food systems and climate interactions. And then I also took social impact, business, society, and the environment. And up on this list, those were the 2 that I took. But I also took food systems, social justice, and public health, which was at the Mailman School of Public Health. And then I took human rights in the Anthropocene course, which was at the Institute of Human Rights and was taught by a professor at the Graduate School of Architecture. And then I took a class in collaborative social justice and health policy that was actually taught by a professor, I think from Yale, maybe. And was kind of law and School of International and Public Affairs related. So yeah, it really is your opportunity to do those classes that you never got to do, and that maybe, you know, pick up on the areas that the core courses don't fulfill for you personally and for your kind of interest areas. But yeah, most of mine were very centered around health, human rights, food. One thing I will say is a lot of people there are two ways to think about it. One is to go down kind of line of interest and just take classes that you're interested in, which could also be filmmaking, astrology, those sorts of things. And that can also add value to you as a climate practitioner. But the other line is to go down routes that you think might be more employable, if you're looking at a career in the corporate sector, something like social impact or ESG reporting is obviously a valuable course. If you're looking at careers in monitoring, GIS, data-based ones are good electives to take. So I think you can either be you can follow your heart and you can follow your head, and sometimes if you get lucky, you can follow both of them.
I love that, Van. Follow your heart and follow your head. I'm going to use that. I will absolutely use that. And Alora, how did you approach the elective journey?
Yeah, I think I had a similar approach to Van, is that I knew that the electives were an opportunity to basically mold this program into what I thought would be best for my interests. And for me, I wanted to be able to speak about this program to during interviews and to future employers, and be able to reference these electives as ways that I am sort of like molding myself to be a little bit more employable. So what that meant for me was that I wanted to take law and policy courses. I wanted to sort of hone on areas that I thought were potentially weaker. So for me, that was like data science. So I took a core data science class in the spring semester. I took the law and policy course in the fall semester. I also took a sustainable transportation economy course. So that was all about economics and building sort of financial arguments for EV adoption. So all of that was very new to me. So I sort of use my electives as ways to tackle potential like weaknesses in my own skill set that that the core courses maybe didn't allow. So for example, that economy class, we did a lot of financial modeling that I had never done before. So it was really an opportunity to stretch and learn more. And as far as cross-registration, I ended up taking 2 courses in the SUMA school and 2 within the climate school. I will say it is much easier to enroll in the climate school electives, just because you get priority, obviously, as a climate school student. So if there are electives in the climate school that speak to you, I would say go with that. Don't hesitate, because enrolling in other colleges that are not within the climate school does require a little bit more work depending on the school. So within SUMA, I think generally it's seen as a little bit easier than other schools. But there still were a couple of hurdles that I had to run into, such as class limits, because the SUMA students get priority over other students. And so I had to email the professor, I had to meet with him in person, then he created a list of students on the wait list, and I was lucky enough to get in, but that could have not been the case. So I think my advice is that, especially now that there are so many more climate school electives that are being added, seize that opportunity because you have priority with those classes. And other schools, that's not the case, so it can be a little bit more challenging. But because there are so many really interesting and really useful electives in the climate school, I wouldn't worry about that too much anymore. But just keep that in mind as you're looking at the courses and where they're registered. So you'll see the CLMT, at least when I was enrolling, that was sort of the climate school course acronym that was used. So if you see that, those are the courses that you will have an easier time enrolling in. That was just my impression. So yeah, I think thinking strategically of how you want to use your electives is can be a really great approach. As Van was saying, either for exploration purposes or just for building sort of a more marketable sort of application for future jobs. Yeah.
Sorry, just to jump back in, if I can. Super quick. One thing I think also in line with being strategic is doing things early. So with a lot of cross registrations, which is when you're applying to other schools, you have to fill out forms and get them signed by the climate school, but also by the dean of the other school, and those sorts of things. So you really want to act quite early. And you'll see when you're looking at courses whether they're open enrollment, so open to everybody, or whether they're restricted enrollment, which is maybe open only to their schools. But I wouldn't let that deter you. I think there have been some classes where it's said that it's restricted access, and I've just dropped an email to the professor and kind of really expressed my interest, and they've been like, okay, happy for you to join, please drop an email, do this, do that. And it can take a period of 5 to 7 days. So I would definitely not leave it to the last minute, because you have a deadline for registering for classes. And yeah, if there are ones that you're interested in, express that interest, draft emails, act early.
You guys are phenomenal. Thank you so much. I want to bring you back to like orientation. So yeah, I mean, I think what Alora and Van are doing is giving you a kind of a very authentic experience, and there's no right or wrong way, I think, to pursue the electives. I think it really just it's up to you in terms of what you're hoping to get out of the experience. That's what's most exciting, I think, also about Columbia Climate School. So thank you guys for sharing those insights. Now I want to, which Van and Alora have also highlighted, was the idea of career resources and professional development. We do have a dedicated career management office working with Columbia Climate School students. I will say that this has been scaling up. So we now have a director of career management along with a career management officer that works directly with our director. We also have an individual that works very closely with our alumni community, and there's a alumni mentorship program that this individual also runs in close alignment with our career management office. So we host employer info sessions. There's resume and cover letter reviews where you can do that for one-on-one appointments. We have sustainability skills seminars. We host the All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Career Fair every February. There's mock interviews, and as Van noted, we also have an exclusive responsive job board, which is through Simplicity. So there's a wide array of career resources available to you. And then because we're such an interdisciplinary school and there is no cookie cut Columbia Climate School graduate, I like to highlight this is an amalgamation of the class of 2022 and the class of 2023. We soon will need to add the class of 2024, which is Van and Alora's graduating class. But this kind of gives you an idea of the sector representation. So 31% private sector, 21% public sector, NGOs represented 27%. And then we have a subset of students that go on into academic and professional research roles. 2% are, or forgive me, further academic pursuits would be the 5%. So if you're looking at students that go on to PhD programs, which a number of, interestingly, MA students have done that in years past. And then this is just again a very tight list of, and by no means the penultimate list, but of where some recent alumni have gone on to work, whether it's the Nature Conservancy, the World Bank, New York City's Mayor's Office of Climate Resilience. We've had students go into the private sector like Boston Consulting Group and McKinsey. Again, we've had students that go on to work in media like the Washington Post and CBS. But it's a very broad list of dynamic industry sectors and professional roles, the through line being that they're working in the climate and sustainability space. I'll now briefly touch on financial aid and specifically fellowships, or I should say scholarships. We're getting away from the word fellowships. We're really highlighting scholarships now. So in terms of the MA Climate and Society program and the MS in Climate, they share climate school scholarships, which are merit-based scholarships. If you are interested in scholarships, I highly recommend that you apply by our priority deadline, which is January 15th. 2025. Anybody that's joining me today, anybody that's on this call, learning about Columbia Climate School and interested in the fall 2025 enrollment, then you should absolutely take advantage of January 15th, 2025 priority deadline. You're automatically considered for climate school scholarships. And each and every year, we hope to increase the ratio of students that do get those scholarships. This most recent cohort, which was the fall 2024 intake, just under 60% of the new incoming class received a scholarship. And again, we're only hoping to increase that ratio. And then we also have external fellowship directories that we like to highlight. And actually, if you don't mind me taking a pause and asking my colleague Damaris Diaz, Damaris, if you could copy and paste an external fellowship directory and Google Sheet. It's kind of a public sheet that Columbia Climate School students, interestingly, that were a part of Van and Alora's class put together for us. And it shows both domestic and there's a domestic and an international tab. So if you are interested in external fellowships, we recommend starting to do that research now. And then I will say many of our students do use federal and private loans to help fund their graduate degree education. And next year, we're working with the Columbia University Student Financial Services Office that will assist students with their financial aid application process. Again, we have 2 deadlines, and I can't emphasize enough to take advantage of the January 15th, 2025 deadline. Decisions will be released in March. And again, it's recommended if you're interested in a climate school scholarship. And then the final deadline's March 1st. Our online application process is, and the general review process is holistic, meaning there is no one component that is a determining factor of whether or not you are admitted to Columbia Climate School. Every element of your application is going to be carefully reviewed and assessed by our admissions committee. So in the online application, you'll upload your resume, you'll upload 2 letters of reference, or actually provide us the names of your references. If you've been enrolled in an undergraduate university within the last 5 years, we ask that one of them be academic. The second recommendation letter can be academic or professional. And for those of you joining who have been outside of school or outside of university for more than 5 years, you don't need an academic recommendation. You could provide 2 professional recommendation letters. We also ask for unofficial college transcripts that you would simply upload to the online application system. If you attended multiple universities, we would need all of those transcripts. And then we also require an English language test, such as the TOEFL, the IELTS, or the Duolingo English test. So we have 3 options, and that's only required for students whose first language is not English, and if English was not the language of instruction in your undergraduate university. If that was the case, then we would need one of those tests. And we do have minimum test scores because English is the medium of instruction at Columbia University. In order to succeed here, you do need to have a strong foundation in English. So we were looking for a 100 on the TOEFL, a 7.5 on the IELTS, and a 135 on the Duolingo English test. The final component is the statement of purpose. And that is, I would think, one of the most critical components. It's certainly going to address many questions the admissions committee has regarding your candidacy. So the statement of purpose is up to 1,000 words. And for the MA in Climate and Society, in these 1,000 words, you should share your key experiences that led to your interest in the climate school. What are your professional and academic goals? Why is enrollment critical within the MA Climate and Society program? And specifically, which climate core course you are most excited to complete. That is a little hint for candidates applying to the MA program. Which climate core course are you most excited to complete? Bearing in mind, we just talked about what a dynamic and diverse elective journey you have. We want to make sure that you, as a Columbia Climate School applicant, you are deadly serious about climate and you are deeply committed to exploring the climate core. Again, the idea of these core set of courses that are required of all of you, regardless of industry or sector. So we want you to reflect which core course you're most excited to complete. And then the MS in Climate is a very similar statement of purpose. In fact, it's identical with exception to one additional data point. We want to understand which advanced certificate, in addition to the climate core course, but which advanced certificate you're most interested in pursuing. I want to emphasize that the MS in Climate program, when you're applying for the degree, you're sharing the certificate that you're most interested in, but I don't want you to feel that you're locked into that certificate. You don't officially declare the certificate until the end of your fall semester. So you still have time for expiration. So for example, you might apply to the program and you might say food systems is your most interested certificate. But as you're continuing your fall journey, all of a sudden you decide, you know what, ultimately you want climate systems and analytics. You can declare that officially during that fall semester. I also want to note that the advanced certificate is a non-negotiable unless you are pursuing a dual degree that's sanctioned by the university. So you will, in the MS in Climate program, need to complete one of those 3 advanced certificates: food systems, climate systems and analytics, or disaster management. And if you don't complete one of those, it's because you're completing a dual degree, for example, with the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, or GSAP. And that concludes the presentation. Forgive me, I did run a couple minutes over. I want to open to Q&A. Van and Alora, if you're able to stay for Q&A, I welcome you to remain on, but I also authentically know that you guys carve time out of your work schedules to make time for me. So I just want to say, if you do need to transition off the call, I want to say thank you, huge thank you. But let me go ahead and stop sharing, and I will go ahead and open the Q&A box. One question is, will GRE scores be submitted? Yes, or be considered? Yes, if you wish to submit a GRE score and you're particularly proud of them, you're welcome to submit the GRE score, and it goes under consideration by the admissions committee. If you never took a GRE, you are not required to submit one. Although if you're applying to the MS in Climate program, it might behoove you to submit a GRE score if you have a non-quantitative background, but the admissions committee is not requiring it. So I want to emphasize that. Is there a condition for English language proficiency tests for international students? Is there a condition? Again, you would be required to submit the English language test if English is not your first language and was not the language of instruction in your undergraduate university. Cassie, I'm so glad you made it. I assume if you're interested in the dual degree and would speak to that during the advanced certificate portion of the app essay. Yes, Cassie, that's such a great point. I'm so glad you called that out. Because the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation is a brand new option, we just announced it last week. That is correct, Cassie. If you're interested in that option, you would highlight that in lieu of the advanced certificate in your statement of purpose. There would also be a section in the admissions application where, rather than indicating the advanced certificate, you could indicate the GSAP option. Betty's asking if I'm interested in the GSAP dual degree program, but would like to use my first semester to determine if it's the right fit. Is there an option to apply before your second year? Also, would I need to indicate my interest in the dual degree on my current application, even though I'm not applying for it initially? That's a great question, Betty Lynn. I would recommend indicating that you are interested in your admissions application, but just know that you're not locking yourself into that GSAP option by indicating that. You can still pursue the advanced certificate in your first year. Or forgive me, you can still pursue the advanced certificate instead. So what I would recommend, Betty, is applying to the MS in Climate program, indicating an interest in the GSAP dual degree. But ultimately, if you're still not sure, then you don't have to apply to that dual degree. I would hold off on applying to it until the fall of 2025. But you know what? This is actually, we're getting a little nuanced here. So forgive me, Betty. I would recommend let's have a one-on-one conversation. If you want to email us at the admissions@climate.columbia.edu, you and I can go dive deeper into kind of like what's the best path, because that's a little bit more nuanced. Hudson asks, what sort of criteria are there for internships and how flexible are they? I have several reasons. Of one of the on the ground experience as a wild land firefighter. Could something like this be used? Oh, that's so interesting. And you know what? You know what's so interesting? Ian Hunt was doing that type of work before coming to Columbia Climate School. And sorry, Alora and Van know Ian well because Ian's in their cohort and worked with us. But the internship is very, I would say, very flexible. Let me pause there. And Alora and Van, did you find any kind of, when reviewing internships, did you find any issues? Like kind of guardrails, so to speak?
I would say in my experience, no, it totally depends on where you're applying and what skills are required of that internship. But I would say from my experience, any sort of professional experience you have, academic research experience, you can sort of make an argument of how that could be useful for that internship. So I wouldn't discount any experience you've had as not being relevant. I think there's probably a way that you can speak to it that would be compelling to people interviewing you. But it definitely does depend on the skills required of that particular position.
That was excellent, Alora. Thank you for that. And forgive me, I just typed an answer about climate systems and analytics curriculum, and I have no idea how it turned out because I sent an email response to a student on Friday asking for more details, and I sent it to them. I'm not sure. I just pasted it, so I apologize if it came out looking extremely wonky. But essentially, for all 3 certificates, I didn't go into the details of the curriculum, but it's an 18 credit hour requirement. 12 of the credits are required, so they're going to be predetermined for you within the advanced certificate. And the remaining 6 credits, think of them as electives within the advanced certificate. And they're really selectives because you're going to be provided a list of courses that could be made up of the advanced certificate. And interestingly, those list of courses could be cross-registered. So within the climate systems and analytics, for example, some of the courses are in the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences or the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So I hope it turned out okay when I pasted that information. Another question relates to the maximum scholarship for ideal students. So I can share with you the scholarship range that we've been giving. So it ranges anywhere from $10,000 to the maximum that we've awarded is $35,000. Very rare circumstances, but that's the maximum. What I want to just notify all the students on the call is that we are a new school, but we are always trying to raise additional funds specifically for education purposes. That's the whole goal of our development team. So me sharing with you what we awarded last year, it might be a very different number this coming year. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to offer more scholarships. There are no guarantees from that standpoint, but if you are interested in scholarships, what's my number 1 rule? January 15th, priority deadline. Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, I think that wraps up the session. And I just want to say huge thank you, Alora and Van. Thank you so much. Alora, you're in California now, right?
I'm in San Francisco. Yeah.
Thank you for being so early and joining me for this call. And Van, thank you so much. I really sincerely appreciate both of you guys joining and sharing your experiences. And you're both phenomenal students and you're making Columbia Climate School proud. So I just want to say alumni, I should say. Now you're alumni. So thank you. I so appreciate it. And I look forward to intersecting again. Van, are you still in the neighborhood? I might see you.
Yes,
Okay.
You'll see me at Trader Joe's again.
All right, brilliant.
But yeah, no, thank you for having us, and everyone feel free to reach out to us if there's anything you'd like to learn. I think we're all always happy to chat on this program, and there's a really vibrant community of practitioners who are united by this same goal.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Alora.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye, guys.